Hi, everyone. New Deal relief was the most important and controversial component of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal programs. This was unprecedented because it involved the federal government providing employment directly to Americans. First in American history, no administration had done this. So it was considered quite radical for its time. Remember what you read in Eric Foner's coverage of the Hoover administration and what I talked about Herbert Hoover through his program, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, had offered loans to companies in a way to try to help companies get back on their feet. And the thinking was thereby that would help bring people back to work. And that's fine. The New Deal actually continued the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. But the Roosevelt administration also felt with millions of Americans unemployed and many more Americans who were still working but facing having their wages and hours cut, that it was critically important to provide temporary work for Americans, and that's what the relief component of the New Deal attempted to do. So again, I've divided the New Deal up into these categories of recovery, relief, reform. First PowerPoint looked at recovery, and the New Deal's efforts to help revive three major sectors of the American economy: banking, agriculture, and industry. And now we're going to look at these programs that comprise the relief component and providing temporary work for Americans. So the way the New Deal went about this was to set up an array of federal agencies, and we're not going to cover all of them, just the more significant ones, but all of them designed to provide temporary employment to Americans. The Public Works Administration, the Civil Works Administration, these are two that Foner talks about, and as their titles indicate, their purpose was to engage in projects that provided some tangible result for the American public. So with both of these agencies, many of their things involved construction projects of one sort or another, and these included, as I list here, things like roads, bridges, post offices, schools, dams. I'll have an example of that in the next slide. Airports. If any of you have flown into LaGuardia Airport in New York City, it was as originally built. I mean, it's been expanded quite a bit, but it was a New Deal project. This is just one example of what I'm talking about. This was a Public Works Administration, PWA project in Montana, the Fort Peck Dam, which still stands. And construction of this dam took a couple years and employed 11,000 people. So again, here are 11,000 people in just this one project who have rewarding, significant work with good pay. And again, the New Deal thinking is that these won't be permanent, but that they will provide temporary employment for Americans to help them get through the Depression. For young American men of high school and college age, one of the important New Deal relief agencies was the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, that employed hundreds of thousands of young men in various environmental projects across the United States. We have remnants of a couple different CCC camps here in West County, St. Louis. Most of the work of the CCC and the people who enrolled in it took place in state and national parks, and this involved all sorts of things: planting, timbering, building roads, trails, lodges. A lot of the hiking trails still used in state and national parks today were New Deal projects. The CCC was very structured. Young men went to these camps. You were awakened very, very early, started your day about 6 a.m. did some morning calisthenics, breakfast, went to work. There was a mid-morning break, back to work, a lunch break, mid-afternoon break. Your day finished mid-afternoon, kind of like a school day, usually around 3 or 4. There'd be a little bit of downtime before dinner, and then in the evening, there were programs that offered vocational training of all sorts of things, from welding to radio repair, again, to provide people skills that could help them get employment when their stint in the CCC ended. And the pay in the CCC was good enough that many of these young men were able to send money home to their families. You see in the slide here, typical for this era, the United States was extremely racist, highly segregated country, and CCC offered employment to Black Americans, but camps were strictly segregated. This is an example of in the local area of a New Deal project. If any of you have been to Pere Marquette Park near Grafton, Illinois, the original part of the lodge there that you see here in the picture with this massive fireplace, that was a New Deal project. In fact, most of the lodges in state parks in Illinois were built under the New Deal back in the 1930s. Now, the one at Pere Marquette Park has a whole, modern addition that they added later with the swimming pool, but this original part dates back to the New Deal. Another important agency was the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, which provided all sorts of creative work. You see a group of women here engaged in a sewing project in Louisville, Kentucky. The WPA had people raking leaves in the fall, shoveling snow in the winter. My hometown of Alton, Illinois, there are a number of sidewalks around town that were laid by the WPA where you can still see its inscription in the sidewalk. One of the most amazing things about the New Deal was its commitment to the arts. The WPA funded the arts in a variety of ways and provided work to writers, actors, musicians, playwrights, artists. You see in this slide some of the examples of public art that artists did. This play, The Great Commoner, was a WPA-funded production. There were a number of symphony orchestras that still exist today that were established under the New Deal. Several years ago, my wife and I did a vacation to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and the Historical Museum there had a display of art done just by artists in New Mexico as part of the WPA, and it was just astonishing, the array of output from paintings to sculpture, all sorts of stuff. So this is pretty incredible when you think about an administration in the midst of this horrible economic downturn known as the Great Depression, that the Roosevelt administration says the arts are important and have a significant place in American society and culture, and we're going to do what we can to support them as well. So New Deal relief, as I said, was controversial. Roosevelt's critics argued that by doing this, you were going to make Americans dependent on the government. But these programs were extremely popular, and the Republican Party's alternative, which they never offered one, they were just opposed to this, was to kind of go back to the Hoover method of waiting for things to correct themselves. And for most of the American public, now you're several years into the Depression, that didn't seem to be a fitting, sufficient response. So the relief programs, as I said, controversial, extremely popular, and a key component of Roosevelt's New Deal program.